For people who have worked in customer service, who was your rudest customer? I worked at Boots for a couple years whilst in college. Lots of entitled, rude, middle-aged customers there, but one sticks out for me. I told her how much her shopping came to, and she counted out some notes and coins and plonked them onto my counter, so I had to ski them up. I counted out her change and did the same back, plopping it onto the counter for her to pick up. She circled round to the pharmacy and complained to my manager. I told my manager I assumed she didn't like to be touched, because that's how she gave me her money. Story 2. All 3 in the bakery I worked at when I was in college. To summarize the stock, you could buy full cakes for $30, those same cakes cut into 12 and sold by the slice at $3.50, and mini cupcakes in all the flavors were introduced as a sort of generous sample size. I recall they were about a quid. Man in orders one of the quid cakes on his lunch break. Came back after work to ask for a free, full-size slice of his choice because he'd taken a bite of his mini and didn't like it. Was refused. These are 2-bite mini cupcakes to work out whether you like the flavor or not, and you don't. Tough crap. He tried again the following day before work, pulling the same mini half-eaten scrap of cake out, and was refused again. Tried again on his lunch break. Refused again. Took his final shot after work, and when refused, he just chucked it at me. Grown adult in a formal suit, working in central London, for context. Man 2 comes in and asks for half a cake. Just take a whole cake and cut it in half, but don't make slices. I agreed and cut one in half in front of him, and let him know that there's no half cake option, so on the till, it'll be calculated as 6 slices and not as 50% of the full cake. He spent a good 5 minutes making himself red in the face, screaming about, "I don't want slices. Why do you keep ducking talking to me about slices? How are you this stupid? Do you not speak English? It's like talking to a monkey." His requested half cake was sitting on the counter in its open box in full sight throughout all of this. He could see it hadn't been cut into slices. Stormed out and didn't buy it since this thick ducking idiot is refusing to listen to simple instructions. His partner wife looked like she wanted to die. The vibe was like Ronnie Pickering and his wife just disassociating, pretending she's not there, LMAO. Woman 1. The brand of the bakery was a sort of friendly local vibe, so it was pretty normal to make drinks prior to payment. An American lady orders a hot chocolate, then saunters out the door to take a phone call. She gestures no and walks off down the road, so her drink has to be thrown. It wasn't powder hot chocolate, it was real homemade with chocolate, cream, milk, vanilla pods that didn't generate much profit. She returns about 15 minutes later and now asks again for a hot chocolate. This time I request payment before starting. She goes mental, even coming behind the till to scream right in my face. Pretends to take a phone call and said, "Yeah, call me back because I'm in the middle of something with a stuck-up Karen," followed by some incoherent babble. Switches to accusing me of being rude to serve her because she's Hispanic. At this point, I asked her to leave. I had no authority to do that, but yeah. She now insists she has diabetes. Her blood sugar was low and therefore I have to serve her, or else she'll report me to the Department of Health. Told her there's a PERT down the road, get a snack from there and use their Wi-Fi to do it. Mental scene. Story 3. My main once, I was working at Smith's Toys. This was my 3rd shift there. This was when the Mini came out. There was a duck-up where too many pre-orders were allowed, and so a bunch of pre-orders were canceled. And this guy came in to get his pre-order, and turned out he had one of the canceled ones. And this guy was pissed, which then led to me standing at the counter crafting myself for however long with the shop security guard lurking nearby whilst one of my coworkers tried to calm him down as this guy blustered, and he went to me at one point like, "Am I threatening you?" Which he wasn't. Directly, he was directing his ire at my coworker, to which I was like, no, even though I was terrified and I was legitimately worried he was going to jump over the counter, like he was a big, bald, football loud type. Eventually, he was persuaded to leave. Then apparently he came back later as he did have one of the legitimate pre-orders. So I think he was pissed. He couldn't get 2 to sell one or something at the same job. I got a, "You should be ashamed of yourself," from a pissed off dad, as we were running a, "If you spend X get you off" promotion. It didn't include software, which included Lego Dimensions stuff. Guy comes in with his son to take advantage of the offer. Kid picks out a bunch of Lego, including Dimensions. So it's like, sorry, that's not in the promotion queue. Being accused of misleading because the radio advert didn't say anything, when the details were on the posters around the shop and the website. Guy wouldn't accept a refund, or taking off the Lego Dimensions toys demanded the details of the manager and our address so he could write a letter. Most recent one at my current job, a branch of one of the outdoor goods brands, which was more something where I kind of witnessed the fallout rather than the direct incident. Customer came in wanting to exchange a coat. It was an online order, which means we can't do a direct exchange. We have to process the web return, and that's dealt with by someone else. You need to rebuy the item. He proceeds to get really prissy at the manager on duty, has problems finding his paperwork so he can do the refund, gets so prissy he throws money at her calls, and he's loitering around the shop until he's like, "Are we done?" And my manager's like, "Yes." She gets called a ducking Karen and a cow on the way out. He demanded her name. Code is then put out the back at work, and it reeks of weed. We then end up getting 3 phone calls over the rest of the night, like from this guy and from his partner, that are kind of trying to angle for details on my manager. At one point, one of my coworkers picks up the phone and does a, sorry, she just left. Security was called about this just on the off chance he was lurking around. It was just a really bizarre moment. Story 4. A lady called and needed help entering a discount code. While trying to get her to just literally type in the letters exactly as they are, I was interrupted, sworn at, and she did that mimicking thing where you do an impression of the other person's voice but implying they have Down syndrome or something. Cut her off. She complained. Manager listened to the call and closed her account and banned her. She argued that her mental health was suffering, which caused her to forget her manners. Story 5. This is a long story with lots of important context, but it's the only time I've ever actually lost it and snapped on the call. I work for a timeshare company, customer service for members over the phone. Said company has a Europe and US side to the company. We in Europe take calls from Europe and the US on a regular 0930 to 1800 shift, with the Americans waking up and coming online at 1. Now, it's not only timeshare members that can stay at our resorts. Some availability is considered unsold inventory, and the resorts can do what they like with it. Many put it up for cash bookings on Booking.com, Expedia. When you call one of our resorts, there are numerous options. The first options are for timeshare members to get through to the general customer services for their membership. Front desk is the last option in the list. As a result, many people get through to us with cash bookings from a third party. We don't have the software or training to service these people. They need to be transferred through to whatever resort they were trying to get through to. And so it's nearly the end of the day for me. I've spent the last 30 minutes just transferring people to various resorts because they can't be bothered to listen to the full menu. I get this call from someone with an Expedia booking. I attempted to go through the standard verification process and quickly established that I would need to transfer her. And so I explained that she had selected the wrong option in the menu and had gotten through to a general timeshare customer service. So far, fairly standard. She then tells me that I am wrong and that she called the resort. I explain again that she has selected the wrong option and I am not at any resort. I then ask which resort she called and she says, "You should know you are there." I explain again that I'm not there and I need to know what resort she wanted so I could transfer her. She insisted I should know because I am at the resort. We went back and forth going over the exact same points for a good 5 minutes. I asked what resort she wanted and she said I should know because I'm there. Eventually, after a good 5 minutes of this, she asks me where I am right now. I say, I am in the UK, we work from home. If you want to take a transatlantic flight and come sleep in my bed, then feel free to do so, since you clearly think you're staying in the same building as me tonight. She hung up. Story 6. Decades ago, I worked in W.H. Smith's in the book stepped. One customer was a German lady who was obsessed with British royal family and had a subscription to a German language magazine about the royals that we ordered in for her, but it was always delayed. She would try to find a news person to complain to, but they were never working, so she'd come to books to complain. I couldn't do anything about it since it's not my debt. And anyway, it comes from abroad, so we can't do anything about it turning up on time. She eventually snapped and shouted at me in English and German about how rubbish we were, etc. I just nodded along and said, okay. She came back an hour later with a bunch of flowers and apology. Another customer was going to visit her family in India. She wanted to buy her relatives a biography of Gandhi. I would have thought they'd have better ones than we did, but I checked the one she specifically wanted. It wasn't something we normally stocked, so we had to do a special order. And I knew from experience, those types of orders could take at least 6 weeks to arrive. Told her, she said that's fine. She's going in 8 weeks, so as long as it definitely arrives in 6 weeks, she's happy. I warned her, I can't guarantee that because it's an external supplier, so they're unpredictable. She said I should be able to guarantee it. I replied again. If it was one of our regular books from our regular supplier, it would be here in days, but these types of orders couldn't be guaranteed, and since she's going on holiday, it's her risk to take. She just got more and more angry that I wouldn't guarantee it and demanded a manager, who told her the same exact thing and not me. But I worked with a really attractive young blonde woman, and this creep would turn up close to closing time and ask her stupid work requests and then would try to get her number etched. Made her really uncomfortable. He kept coming in, and we had no security and no manager at that time. So as soon as I spotted him, I'd warn my colleague to go hide in the stockroom, and then I'd deal with him. He'd ask if she was in, and I'd say she wasn't working today, so he'd look disappointed and leave. Eventually, he stopped coming in. Story 7. Honestly, the worst I had was 2 different people, both when working at Game. First one was an old woman saying I wasn't old enough to be a manager. I was 24 at the time, and I had no idea what I was doing, and she wanted to speak to the real manager. So I just said, yes, I am the real manager. The second was a dude who went to the other store in the city with his controller that he had clearly spilt something on. They refused him because of that, and also because of no proof of purchase, and told us about it. A few hours later, he comes to us, having surface cleaned the controller. We told him the same thing, and he threatened to climb over the counter and knock me out, with my 2 colleagues and 4 to 5 other customers standing there listening. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Go for it, it won't work." I'm 5'6", he was like 6'1", but clearly not fit. Stunned, he went, "You can't say that? Sir, you just threatened me. I can do whatever I need to in self-defense. If you try climb over this counter and attack me, I am in every right to defend myself and call the authorities." He was not happy and started shouting and swearing and stormed out. Left his controller too. The customers there praised me a lot. Very funny moment. Bonus funny story. I have long, thick, curly-ish hair. I used to work with a guy when in Marquis who had immaculate makeup. Not trans, just a gay guy who is unbelievably skilled with makeup. Seriously. It's scary how good he is. We were at the service desk, facing away, talking and monitoring the tills. An older man comes up to the desk and must have seen my colleague's face from the side and thought he was a woman, and obviously saw my hair and thought I was also a woman. He comes up and says, "Excuse me, ladies." We turn around, me with a full facial beard, my colleague with some fairly masculine features, and we both turn in our deep, clearly male voices going, "Yes, how can I help?" The old man was very stunned. Sorry, I thought you two were, We just looked at each other and laughed and told him it was fine. Story 8, many examples, but I worked in a utilities call center and had to take an escalated complaint call from a customer about 30 seconds before closing time. This lady was apoplectic because we'd had guys working in the streets to fix a sewage problem, and they'd had to reseal the drain covers. To keep the seal, they'd used a special type of industrial caulk to hold everything together. Apparently, this sealant had a very strong chemical smell that she knew was dangerous. It really wasn't. It smells like any other decorative sealant you'd use in your home. What followed was 15 minutes of this woman screaming bloody murder at me. When I inquired, as politely as I could muster, whether she could just shut the window if she was concerned about the smell, she then asked whether I was trying to kill her and her children via extreme heat because it was warm inside. When she realized that I wasn't going to call an emergency out of ours team to unseal the drain covers and release a sewage smell through her road, she asked for my full name as she was going to put it in the note she was leaving out so the police could tell who was responsible for her and her children's deaths when they found the bodies. I think it really sunk in that I wasn't taking her seriously when I offered to spell my name for her to make sure she got it right. People are odd. Story 9. I had a few in my time. Back in 2012, my employer was one of the first to introduce a bag charge for a regular-sized carrier. I was a shift manager and was called out to a customer screaming in my colleague's face that he's a shareholder and shouldn't have to pay for a bag. It was pretty extreme, and he repeated how he pays our wages. I stood firm on the policy, and there was a subsequent investigation when he made a complaint. We were cleared of any wrongdoing, and I was told if I had buckled on the bag charge, I would have been in trouble. He was made to send a formal apology to the store. At another job, it was quite frequent to have awful people at click and collect. We had no control over what was delivered, and quite frequently, next day, delivery parcels didn't turn up on time. Pair this with being given no information or equipment that worked, and that led to be frequently berated. I have a memorable one of a woman screaming in my face that I ruined Christmas because one of her parcels hadn't arrived, albeit it was at least a week until Christmas Day. Several other notable examples being sending a staff member to hospital after a bottle of Tropicana was thrown at her head because the queue was too long, being called a lying idiot because a woman wanted a $9 salmon croûte on a 3 for $12 deal despite it being in a separate Yuen marked-up fridge, and she thought I sneakily changed the label after the fact. Having a drunk customer waiting outside the store after closing because we refused service when they could hardly stand. Had a hospital visit after a customer pushed a top-heavy milk trolley out of the way, causing it to tip with my fingers in the mesh, and it dislocated my thumb. A funny one was a regular customer asked if we had another till out back we could put together because the queue was quite long, and we had all 6 in operation. I actually laughed and then realized they were serious. There are probably so many more that I have forgotten or can't remember enough details of. Story 10. Man called me a stupid little idiot because we sold out of double cream on Christmas Eve, and I wouldn't go and check in the back for him because I knew we'd run out. Story 11. In another lifetime, I worked customer support for PlayStation. Back then, it operated in the UK. We dealt with UK customers, of course, but the night shift dealt with Australia and New Zealand. One morning, I have a stray Aussie call us up. I was in a good mood, so I decided I'd assist him, even though the proper thing to do would have been to tell him to call the Australian helpline when it opened. I knew Australia had some slightly different rules, processes, But all this guy wanted was a simple password reset, so I thought, hey, why not? Won't take longer than 2 minutes. I don't remember much about the call verbatim, but what I thought would be a simple interaction turned into a 55-minute debacle, all for something that the guy could have easily done himself without having to call. First of all, he wasn't convinced that we really were PlayStation, which was stupid since he called us. Trying to get basic information out of him was like trying to get blood from a stone. All I wanted him to do was confirm his email address and date of birth to pass security. He was far more focused on questioning my educational background. I don't even remember if I ever did reset his password in the end, because it seemed like he was far more interested in bullying me than actually getting his issue resolved. At the end of that call, I was so angry, I just walked out of the building to get some air. He was the absolute definition of a bellend, and I don't come across people like that very often, so it genuinely shook me. I was good at my job, and 99% of my callers were polite, cooperative, and reasonable. So this was definitely a him problem. I even had a slight fear of Australian people for a while afterwards. Just what the heck? Story 12. Not customer service, but when I was younger, I did a cleaning job for a few years. I had a couple complaints by staff at the place I cleaned at. One time I was saying, "Can you wait a minute, please? I'll be right there," after she asked me to clean something up. Couldn't at the time as I was doing 2 other things back and forth already off my feet. The supervisor came to me, asking not to do it again. She was nice. Shame she quit. Second one I can vaguely remember at the same place. New supervisor. Luckily, she was great too. Apparently, just the way I spoke to a member of staff was enough to send the area manager in because the complaint was taken that seriously again. All I said was, "Sorry, I'll be with you in a minute." Obviously, they didn't like it. I left a few years after that second incident. Wasn't worth the energy anymore. And because of the personal stuff I was going through on top of that crap pay, combined with the job itself, wasn't worth it at all. So I quit a few weeks later. That's that. I was writing my notice up a few months before I ended up quitting, but because of the personal stuff, I had to stay a bit longer than I would have liked, sadly. I'd never work at that place again. Even if you paid me triple or more, many people who were crap at their own jobs with sticks up their arseholes. I'll never have an ounce of sympathy for that profession because of my experience there. Too much work for little pay. It was only bearable because of the people I worked with cleaning. Hats off to the people I used to clean with and hope they're all doing well. Place was awful. Very few good people working there. But there were lots of bad apples there too, and more than likely still are. Story 13. The small company I've worked for the last 23 years used to have a policy of never hanging up on a customer who was engaged and communicating, even if they were difficult. About 12 or 15 years ago, my manager and friend struggled to help a guy with a complaint. I mean, really went above and beyond trying to get things done for him. The guy didn't really want to be helped. He wanted to be angry. Eventually, the pissed customer asked for her name, which she readily gave. Eventually, he managed to make her cry. At that point, I took the phone from her, told the guy that his number and name were recorded. I had no clue if they were, and would be reported. I told him that if he came to the office in person, he would end up spitting teeth, and that no one else would speak to him if he called back. To close, I suggested that he seek professional help with his issue. I was bullcrafting. I have no idea if he called back or if anyone else spoke with him. I experienced no disciplinary consequences or criticism for intervening and hanging up. My boss, the company owner, MD, apologized to the whole department for the ordeal. If the guy had been physically present, I genuinely would have knocked him the duck out, or tried to. The chap I work for is sound, and my manager is an excellent friend and a brilliant, hard-working, supportive manager. If I had decked the nuttery, I still don't think I would have been sacked. However, less than a year later, I was, with my consent, moved from customer service to writing the company blog, which I have done very happily ever since, but I still have the same manager. Story 14. The flat-out rudest customer I ever encountered was when I worked in the deli at Safeway many moons ago. It was a very busy weekend in the run-up to Christmas. The queue for the deli was massive. We had a paper ticket system, so at least there was some order to the chaos. Due to space, or lack thereof, our meat cutting machines were in a room behind the deli itself, which also led to the deli fridges, etc. So we were always jumping in and out, either to get more stuff from the back or to cut meat. All this preamble is to say it wasn't wholly unusual for it to look like the deli was unstaffed, but usually only for a minute or so until we reappeared. Enter rude customer. This ducker walked up to the counter, passing a crapload of people waiting as he did so, repeatedly ding-donging it on the bell while bellowing like a Victorian schoolmaster. "Staff! Staff! Staff!" As if we had all just decided it would be the height of hilarity to all go for a tea break together and ignore the thronged masses clutching their tickets. Record scratch. Basically, the whole shop stopped to stare at this bloke. Us deli workers all popped our heads out the door like startled meerkats. "Oh good, there you are. I've been waiting a bloody lifetime. How dare you skive off? You can't get the help these days. If I was your manager, I would fire you this instant. I would like 250 ham off the bone, and then, if it's not too much bloody effort, I opened my mouth to say something and was interrupted by an old guy who was not impressed. "Oish, idiot, there's a queue. Pick a number." At which point, Idiot figured out there were about 15 people ahead of him in the queue and flounced off. Story 15. I was working for a mobile phone provider, and a guy's mobile had been cut off as he hadn't paid his bill in months. He hadn't actually paid his bill in longer than that, but he kept calling up and berating staff until they gave him a goodwill credit on his account. There was a note on the account from a manager saying his account wasn't to be given any further credit. When I explained that I wouldn't be able to reactivate his account until he paid the outstanding 10 lon-ish, he told me he was going to find where I worked and abuse me. Story 16. I used to work at a bubble tea place, which was pretty good in terms of customers. Most people were completely lovely. Some people were complete-s though, which always fled me because you're here to buy a sweet treat, a little tea drink. What about that is making you be so effing rude? I'll never forget the customer who ordered 2 regular-sized drinks, 1 fruit tea and 1 coconut water. It was a pretty busy day and the queue was out the door, but he barged into the front of the queue to complain. He was so certain that he was charged for a large coconut water and a regular fruit tea, and would not listen when we tried to explain that the coconut waters cost a little bit more than the fruit teas, as was clearly stated on the menu, that he was red in the face yelling for a good 5 minutes. He ended up throwing the coconut water at my coworker and storming out without the other drink. Hope he's having a better day now, the story scene. I got used to rude people. In fact, after a while, it became quite fun as I'd learned how to wind them up a bit and would make them wait longer, etc. I enjoyed tying people up in their own lies too. The one thing I didn't like was how many times I was labeled as some form of bigot by someone not getting their own way. I lost count of the number of times I was told that I'm idiot. I had a few occasions where I was sexist, and I recall one occasion where I apparently wouldn't help this guy out with a refund because he was short. Story 18. I've worked in shipping and I've worked in independent retail, and the customer service experience is wildly different. In shipping, the customers were commercial customers, and I swear you needed to have a psychology degree just to talk to some of these people. They thought they knew more about my job than me, or at least tried to make me feel like they did when they didn't. They also seemed to think they could trick or intimidate people into getting people into trouble, to get themselves out of trouble. Like there was a port strike. I gave them tons of warnings that their shipment could be affected, gave them regular updates, bent over backwards to get their delivery to them as quickly as possible, only for them to try and twist my words and try to imply that I was accountable for the delay because I said, "Our apologies for the inconvenience." Retail customers can be more unhinged, but they're fairly simple to deal with. Like, they aren't generally trying to blame you for something that wasn't your fault or was actually their fault for a profit. They either want what they paid for or are chancers. The most unhinged retail customer was the lady who was fobbed off by the local council because they wouldn't recycle the tattered clothes she originally bought from us. They told her to contact us, probably knowing full well that we wouldn't be able to do anything either. They likely just wanted to get her off their backs. I was the end of the line, and I had nobody to fob her off to, unfortunately. C went on a full rant and chewed my ear off about the environment and how inconsiderate we were for like 40 minutes. Would probably still rather that than shipping customers, though. Story 19. Worked in a sushi place in a busy train station. The restaurant was one with a conveyor belt. I had a dirty table to empty and clean thoroughly. Few piles of mini plates with like 10-15 dishes on each and rice everywhere. We had like 6 really hungry customers sitting there. A small group of Chinese tourists walks in. For some reason, Chinese tourists never waited to be seated, always went and sit down. I asked nicely a few times for the party to move to allow me to clear the table. The guy plainly refused and didn't move an inch. I asked again, and he was still refusing and wanted to pass me the plates to speed up. I warned him crap would fall on him, didn't listen. He even moved some plated in a small pot of raspberry coulis, which was on one of the top plates, flew and landed on his light jacket. Same company, different restaurant. Someone sat on our outside table and was on the phone minding his business. Went to ask him if he wanted to order anything. He told me to come back. 30 minutes later, I asked again, telling him nicely the table was only for consuming customers. He asked me to give him some more time. Another 30 minutes passed. I was busy with opening the restaurant, so I took longer to go out. The guy told me to duck off. Told my manager, as per normal procedure. My manager, a tall, scary Egyptian, went and put the guy in his place. Guy comes in, super apologetic, extremely nice, eats in and gives me a nice tip. Story 20. When I was 16, I worked at the local supermarket on Saturday afternoons. Prime lottery ticket machine time. The joy. This gentleman turned up at the counter and wanted it to process a good 20-odd tickets as it was a syndicate. I told him I would need a moment to get another colleague to come and help as the counter I was on was super busy. cigarette kiosk, which also did 5 items or less, so it was basically a constant stream of people all day. He seemed happy enough to wait for my mate to come along a couple of minutes later. I then went to start using the lottery machine only to find that it wasn't working. It wasn't connecting to the system, so nothing could be done. This guy absolutely lost his mind over this and started threatening me with a good hiding for my incompetence, along with trying to grab me by my shirt and pull me over the counter. He was screaming and shouting and literally foaming at the corners of the mouth. Frankly, it was terrifying. So I pressed the emergency button under the counter. Complete lunatic behavior, considering I had explained that there was nothing I could do as it was a problem beyond our control. Once the police arrived, they told us he has already been to the other shop at the other end of the small town, and that wasn't working either, so he was aware that there was a problem. To top it all off, I get picked up from work that evening by my dad, and as we're going up the drive, I see the new neighbors who are moving in. Guess who it was? Story 21. I was 16, working at WHS Smith. My manager was an idiot, like easily one of the most stupid people I've ever met, and also a control freak. Had a man come in and try to pay with a Scottish 10-pounder note. I was not sure it was fine for me to accept, but I also knew how dumb my manager was and wanted her to check it before she accused me of taking a fake note, etc. I knew that if she decided it shouldn't have been accepted, I'd never hear the end of it, even if it was legally fine. I told the man I needed to check with my manager and rang the bell for her to come down. He went ballistic, immediately shouting, calling me ducking stupid, talking about how it was legal tender and what the hell was wrong with me. He was getting in my face, properly yelling, going on and on about how ducking thick I must be, all while his horrible son stood there, smirking like his dad was in the right. This man was at least 50 years old. I was 16 and looked quite a bit younger. I was so scared and upset, I eventually caved and just accepted the note. My manager strolled down about 5 minutes after he'd left to ask what the commotion was. Story 22. I worked for a while back as a customer tech advisor and had this couple who rang up because their 5-pagey top-up didn't work. So I had to go through a process on my screen getting them to restart the phone, and I'd call them back and then doing like a network refresh. Did all these things and it just wasn't working. So my manager says we can just credit them 10 times to the mobile as a goodwill gesture. Just before telling them the good news, they just erupted on the phone. They were already horrible. And they started calling me an idiot. And then the guy's girlfriend took over the phone and started harassing me, not letting me get a word in. The guy then snatched the phone and started saying he hoped I would die on my way home or that I should jump in front of a bus. This carried on for a good 10 minutes with them ranting on about how they've got bipolar, all that other crap. I eventually managed to tell them we can give them the $10 credit, to which they swore, and said we want $500 upon compensation for the harassment has put them through. I said we couldn't offer that. And then they both started screaming down the line at full pelt, asking for a manager to, which my manager ran over and took the call over for another 2 hours. Literally, my whole team could hear them screaming. Story 23. I worked in a leisure center which had recently changed their systems, and I was new to the job. A guy walked up saying he forgot his card, okay? No problem. What's your name? Justin. Justin, what's your surname so I can search you on the system? Proceeds to shout at me, saying, I don't deserve to know his surname, blah blah. I tried to stay calm and said, if you don't give me your surname, you can't use the gym. He proceeded to lean over the counter and shouts, you need to use the ducking gym instead. Look at yourself. I was a very self-conscious 20-year-old at the time. I ran into the back room and proceeded to cry for 10 minutes. To this day, his words still hurt. He came in a few months later, apologies, he got banned for numerous other reasons, and said he'd buy me some fruit to make up for it. Story 24. Let me set the scene. Christmas 2020, I was freshly 18 and working my first retail job. A woman comes up to the till trying to buy a knife and some wrapping paper. She looked about 18, 20, and obviously it's a challenge, 25 policy to buy knives. She was standoffish from the start of the transaction and was on FaceTime to someone when she walked up. I asked for ID and she said, my mom's on FaceTime. Can she just show you my ID on the screen? I said, no, I can't accept that. She flipped out on me, literally screaming that she was a regular customer, that I have ruined Christmas, I was a Karen for not selling to her, etc. Like full-on tantrum. So I got my manager to come down and I thought she'd back me up. But my manager said she'd seen her before and to just sell it to her and not make a fuss. I couldn't believe how much my manager wasn't backing me up. But this woman was absolutely buzzing about it and turned around to fellow customers in the queue, smugly ranting about how I was incompetent and such a Karen. I started crying like full-on tears running down my face and onto my Christmas jumper. Hated that manager from then on until I left the year after. Story 25. I worked behind a bar when I was younger. Some fella came in and asked for a pint. I think it was Carling, But we were waiting on a delivery and it was dry, so he said I'll have a Stella at the same price as the Carling then. Usually, I'd have just said no problem. It wasn't a big difference anyway. But he was so rude about it, so I said no. He said fine, bought the Stella, and as soon as I handed it to him, he started gabbing off at me, saying I'm robbing him, etc., and just being a nasty git. I carried on doing what I was doing, but he just kept going. So I said, "You're not getting served again." Woof. He launched his pint all over me and walked out. Never saw him again. Proper crank. It was funny though, but I'm glad it was me and not one of the barmaids. Story 26. I worked at Toys R Us, and after Christmas, when I was 17 years old, a customer told me I had ruined his child's Christmas. He hadn't realized he needed to buy a separate battery pack for the remote control car he bought. I can understand that being frustrating, but to tell a 17-year-old girl that they ruined your child's Christmas? I apologized to him at the time, as I was young and intimated. I have always felt that having an unreasonably angry parent was more likely to have been what ruined Christmas than the lack of a battery pack. Story 27. Worst bellend I ever had to deal with was on my last day of the job. I worked for a school uniform supplier, and the amount of people who'd call up the week before they're due back thinking that there'll be anything available was staggering. We had it in red text at the top of our website. The school website has the exact same message. They'd send out letters saying the same thing to guaranteed delivery of uniform before start of term, order by X date. But no, they're ducking special and can place an order the Friday before term starts and get it the next day. Anyway, the guy called and was just a proper, anything you said he'd try and twist the words. For example, I said, I'd speak to the warehouse about whether we had any stock and just screamed, "Why can't you go check yourself?" For one, our stock was held in a warehouse in the Midlands, so I can't. And he then started with, "You just said you'd speak to them. You're lying, you can go down, you just don't want to." Like, yeah, okay, mate. Anyway, it was 5:05 on a Friday. Basically everyone but the head of customer service had gone. And it was my last day, and I just had this realization of, what the duck am I doing? And just hung up and went home. Story 28. Worked in a magistrate's court on the fines counter back in the 90s. One guy was in to fight a parking ticket or some innocuous driving offense and was fined £50. He kicked off in court, so it was doubled and told to pay it before the court closed that day. He returned 5 minutes before closing time with the money, in 1p and 2p coins, and a smug look on his face, knowing I'd have to sit there and count it out. A clerk noted there was a limit on how much you could pay with low denomination, and so refused it. He spent a night in the cells as a result, and I still remember how red his face went as he was let off. Story 29. Worked at a coffee shop. It was Christmas Eve. I'm partially deaf in one ear. Not enough to need a hearing aid, but enough to struggle. Queue was long, shop was busy. Anyway, I was on the coffee machine and got to the penultimate customer. He must have been waiting for about 10 minutes from when he entered. Customer was mumbling a lot. I asked him if he wanted chocolate sprinkles on his cappuccino. He nodded. When I put them on, he exploded, said that wasn't what he wanted, and called me an idiot and asked if I was deaf or something. When I said yes, actually, he went very red and shouted more. I vividly remember asking him if he wanted me to make him another one, and he said, "I can't wait that long. My son is sick at home, and you want me to wait even more?" He then sauntered off to the sugar stand and took ages there. I stood there, mouth hanging open like a fish, while the next customer, middle-aged blonde woman, came over and loudly said how disgusting his behavior was, especially at Christmas time. Once I'd finished taking her order and making her drink, she reached across the counter and gave me the biggest hug before telling me, "Merry Christmas." My worst ever customer, immediately followed by my best. Kind of poetic, I guess. Story 30. I was working in a DIY shop one evening when a woman came in. I have no idea what her problem was, but she was rude and obnoxious. As she walked out, I noticed she'd forgotten her bank card. Normally, I'd chase after a customer and hand it back, but I just thought, damn her, I don't want to speak to her again. So I handed it in to my manager, who agreed she was an idiot and didn't fancy chasing her either. Next day, she phoned the shop and somehow managed to get put through to me. She was still rude and obnoxious, saying she worked for the bank and she'd call the police because I'd definitely stolen the card. Then she started accusing me of swearing at her. Woman was a complete idiot. In the end, I told her to cancel her card or come collect it from the manager. Eventually, she did come in and picked it up. Turned out I hadn't stolen it. She did ask why I didn't give it back, and I told her it was because she was a horrible person, and I didn't want to speak to her for a minute longer than I had to. In hindsight, I'd have had a lot less to do with her if I had chased after her. She's probably had a stroke and dropped dead by now. Story 31. I worked as a contact agent for an energy company in the UK. Old bloke called up and told me his smart meter wasn't working. Told him we'd have someone out in the next 12 weeks to check it. Immediately starts swearing and shouting at me. "You silly little girl. You don't have a ducking clue what you're doing. You're a waste of oxygen," etc. Then says, "What am I supposed to do? I can't cook anything." So it's not that your meter isn't working. It's that your supply is off. Get it right and I can help you correctly. So I take him through the emergency engineer form to get someone out to him in the next 4 hours. He's huffing and puffing all the way through it like the most miserable person in the world. As he's classed as vulnerable due to his age, I was duty-bound to ask him at the end of the form if he wants to set a password for the engineer to, quote, at his door so he knows the right person is with him. He responds with, "I'll bloody well know when I see his bright yellow high-vis, won't I?" What a stupid question. To this day, I wish I'd hung up and put him back in the general care queue to wait for another 2 hours. Story 32. Had a lady who was in a wheelchair and trying to come on the Rapids ride. I worked at scream at me because she physically wouldn't be able to get on the ride, and so I wouldn't let her on. But apparently that made me the bad guy. She supposedly worked in a prison for years, and I was the biggest piece of crap she'd ever met. She kept screaming how she was disabled and should be given more respect, but when I asked for the same respect as an autistic person, that apparently didn't count. She also, I'm pretty sure, insinuated she'd tell people from her work about me, assuming she meant prisoners who she would get to come assault me or something. No matter how many times I told her, if you try to get on the ride, it will break down for all the stuff we will need to do to make it safe for you. Apparently, after I got a manager, they tried to appease her and let her on the ride, which then broke down. I unfortunately missed that because I had to go have a meeting because of how much crap she screamed at me in front of a full queue of customers. Story 33. I've got a few. The best was working as a debt collector. We started outbound calls at 8 a.m., and my first call connected to a Cockney guy who proceeded to scream at me for a full 5 minutes after I'd said my name and where I was calling from. He signed off by "call me a ducking idiot," and I'm just sat there like, I've not even had my cup of tea yet. The second was a woman who threw a pair of 12 shoes at me during a post-Xmas sale, saying they'd make the outfit look cheap. Like, lady, they're 12 their shoes. Why are you even here? And last was the two middle-aged women who walked into the shop at 2:15 on Xmas Eve, past the signs at the door saying we were closing at 2:30, and the signs at the top of the escalators, and the signs at the tills, then had the ducking audacity to complain they didn't know the shop was closing at 2:30. We were all working till at least 6 p.m., setting G up for the sale on Boxing Day. Like, sorry, did you think we just shouldn't get an Xmas at all so you can do some last-minute shopping? Hated that job. Story 34. If I'm truthful most of the time, I mostly only got rudeness as a result of being unable to deal with the abject stupidity that an alarming amount of retail customers displays, especially after I've tried to be as helpful as possible. A classic example being the late 20s guy who asked me where milk was. I responded with what I thought was the reasonable question of, "Certainly, sir, did you want fresh milk or long life milk?" That's fair, right? Not gonna walk them to the opposite end of the store if they want the other thing. That'll really annoy them. Solved with a quick and ultra simple question. Their answer? What? I want the blue one. Right. Naturally, they weren't impressed with me saying, "We only have white unless you want a flavor." And that's before the guy kicking off when I gave him a packet of batter mix when he asked for pancake mix. Story 35. Being screamed at around 6 a.m. in the morning by a crazy lady in front of a long queue of around 60 customers. You guys know that when you open, a lot of customers come in. I never seen a queue like that before at 6 a.m. I was the only one until she claimed that I was making her late for work, being rude and shouting, why my other colleague, who happens to be the supervisor, why she not on the till while she can clearly see that she was cooking, putting frozen stuff away, moving stuff off the shop floor, and getting more food out to the shop floor. She got ridiculously angry and demands to see my supervisor. Then she continued to shout that I was being rude, how dissatisfied she was for a long time. I ended up rushing, cooking, serving, cashing up, making coffee all by myself. The customers were staring, giving her the side eye, the UTF face, and why did I wake up face? And they were all willing to wait till I sort things out. She was shouting for a long time at my supervisor before she finally left, and my supervisor was just dead. Someone should have filmed her, story 36, yesterday. I work in a historic building. In order to protect the visitors and the building from each other, we have some nitpicky rules, and we tend to advise visitors of them on a need-to-know basis. This guy is carrying his kid around the building on his shoulders. The building has several low-hanging glass light fitting. I asked this guy if he could carry the child on his hip or on his front so that the kid didn't hit their head. The guy immediately responded in an aggressive tone, "No, it's okay, I'll leave." I explained that I wasn't asking him to leave. I just wanted him to lower his child in order to keep them safe. He starts angrily lecturing me about how he's the parent, and it's his choice how he carries his child, not mine. I stepped back from him and said, "I just want her to be safe." He said, "That's not your call," and stamped off up the stairs. I get that some people are annoyed by the little rules, but when someone is trying to keep your child safe, surely you take that advice on board. Story 37. I have a few. Some woman called me a lesbian for simply welcoming her and asking if she was doing okay. 2. When I was pregnant and bored on Tills Me, and a coworker started making puns with the sweets. Boredom sucks. A woman came to the tills and asked me questions. I responded. When she was walking away, she just snapped and started insulting us both. Totally different woman to the first incident. 3. A man phoning up insulted me after he called the wrong number, even though I explained that he got the wrong store. My manager ended up having to take the call because the guy was stupid. He ended up having a light bulb moment and realized he made a mistake. Some guy who had obvious health problems complained that we are only allowed to sell 2 boxes of either paracetamol, ibuprofen, or one of each together. He said if you go to a pharmacy, you can buy many without limitations. The pharmacy was a stores down. I explained it's a totally separate licensing system compared to a food store. He still insulted me. Now I understand why I dislike people so much. Story 38. I ID'd a girl who I knew was over 18 but challenge 25, so I ID'd her. Everyone knows about challenge 25. If you don't, then Google it. Her boyfriend, who appears over 25, rocks up and says, "Okay, I'm buying it for her." I explain I cannot tender that transaction. He kicks off and tries the intimidation tactic. The supervisor steps in and makes the transaction instead. Very against store policy. I won't go into actual law here though. She then tells me over the headset, where everyone can hear, that I should be IDing people who appear over 25. Everyone else is saying, "What the heck?" as the other staff saw the whole thing. The assistant manager, higher than the supervisor, comes to me and says, "That was a good call on my part." I tell him that's not on and management should have our backs. Honestly, it weren't so much the customer, even though he was being a douche. It was more how it was handled. It could be one of those classic training videos of what not to do. Story 39. Worked at a box office and a lady came in once saying she'd bought tickets for something but had memory problems and so couldn't remember what. Knew instantly it wasn't going to be an easy transaction. I searched our system using the details she gave me, name, postcode, etc., and no bookings came up. After a few minutes of me clicking around uselessly, she asked, "Are you a volunteer here?" I said, "No, I work here." She said, "Oh, so you get paid to sit around all day being a dirty illiterate?" I guess implying the reason I wasn't finding anything is I couldn't read what was on the screen. I was relatively new in the post, and so I just kind of spluttered and went to get my supervisor. Eventually, we found the booking under her husband's surname and a different postcode. Now I just instantly shut down the transaction and say, "You've been so incredibly rude to me, I won't serve you." But it takes time and experience to get there. Still, dirty illiterate is a fantastic insult. Story 40. I delivered pizza for Pizza Hut. Part of this included collecting any pizzas from customers who complained when providing them with new ones. One family complained that they didn't have enough sauce on their pizzas, which is unusual but fine since everything is measured. The rude part was how the wife kept telling me they had just returned from a trip to Japan, and she kept saying, "In Japan, they hit themselves when they make a mistake like this." Cheers, lady. I'm not going to go tell anyone underpaid to hurt themselves because you didn't enjoy your chain pizza. Story 41. Done. 14 years of retail for my trouble. The ones that stand out, though, had a customer yell at me for a good 20 mins that he wanted to return his kettle, and he knew his right. He could have returned his kettle if had taken it to Curry's where he bought it and not to Sainsbury's where I worked. Had a bother customer bring his slow cooker with a complete dinner inside because it cooked too slow. Again, apparently it was my fault. When the PS4 released, it was on a strictly pre-order basis. Pre-orders had been open for months and there was signs everywhere. This woman hadn't pre-ordered and tried to bully me into giving her my pre-order because she overheard me talking to a colleague about buying it when I finish. When I worked in Aldi, a customer crap on the floor because I wouldn't give him a refund. Another customer claimed we ruined his Christmas because we sold out of broccoli. He was in at 3:55 on Christmas Eve. I've got so many more, but those are the one I remember the most. Story 42. I had a woman spit in my face on the 23rd of December because the overnight delivery hadn't come in, so there were no potatoes for sale. That was a fun day. Story 43. This was in Ireland, then the UK, but working in a mobile phone shop in 2007. A customer arrived, very angry, and complaining about a lack of service. Apparently he'd bought his new mobile phone, and then, a few weeks later, had moved to an island several miles off the coast, where there was no reception. He hadn't mentioned this when purchasing the phone. He still visited the mainland 5 days a week for work, so could still use the phone then. But this did not mollify him. He went into a mad rage and threw the phone at the wall, smashing it to pieces, and he stormed out. We still charged him for the full duration of his remaining contract. While selling Pokemon cards during Christmas 1999, also known as Retail Vietnam, we were down to one last box, and the guy who got it was accosted by the guy behind him, who offered him about 5 times the value of the box and then threatened to hit him in front of about 20 witnesses before backing down. Story 44. I worked at McDonald's for 3 months, and I had multiple experiences that have stayed with me a decade later. The one that pisses me off the most, though, was during an extremely busy lunch rush. A guy had ordered 3 cheeseburgers, but wanted them in 2 separate bags. It was a special order, so he had to wait. During that time, there was constant pressure to take more and more orders, including a complicated order for a large family. By the time the guy's order was ready, I had entirely forgotten about the request for 2 bags and put them in 1. Easily fixable, right? Well, he proceeded to shout things to me like, "What are you, slow?" and all sorts. If he had politely pointed it out, I could have given him another ducking bag. But it's like he got a power trip over verbally assaulting a minimum wage worker. Story 45. I worked for a practice, and when the COVID vaccination became available, Elle was calling people to see if they wished to book in for a vaccination. It was by groups. We started with the group aged 80 or above or similar, and it was great. They were so happy to take the vaccination as they'd been cooped up for so long. The next age group were mainly okay, but I was screamed at, spoken to incredibly rudely, and given verbal abuse more than anyone else. Their biggest beef was that they couldn't book into a vaccination center of their choice. Each practice was allocated a vaccination center, and we could only book appointments for people there. There was no mechanism to book anywhere else. But no, they wanted to go to the closest center, and my explaining the way it worked helped. I offered them a free taxi service to take them there and back, but that wasn't acceptable either. Miserable gits. Story 46. When I worked selling advertising on a local newspaper, I had an argument with a customer once about something, and he told me, "Don't think you can teach me anything about advertising, young man. I used to be the managing director of one of the largest ad agencies in the world," and I couldn't help myself and replied, "Right, and how did you get from that to you haggling about the price of a classified ad for leaflet delivery jobs in the local free paper?" Luckily, he laughed. Story 47. Hey, also dyspraxia, and worked at Macias at 17. I was doing an after-school shift and running food out to the car park. I was literally just getting handed bags of food and taking to the cars. People were asking me questions I didn't know the answers to about when things would be ready. I don't think people realize how separated each part of the Macias process is. Anyway, these 2 grown-ass men in a work van kept having a go at me and shouting at me, and one of them shouted, "You're not very helpful, are you?" 17-year-old me was so crushed by this git statement, I went and cried in the toilet for a good 10 minutes. And another time, I handed a middle-aged woman a bag of burgers I myself had just been handed, to which she said, "Well, you've let it go cold now," as if I was standing around letting food go cold because I'm evil or something. Story 48. Working in a phone shop. Had a customer come in with his 2 rather large teenage sons. Customer started yelling at me the second he came in, and his sons stood at either end of the counter to prevent me moving away. A previous member of staff had been rude to him, and he wanted to complain. Asked for his name or customer number to check notes. He'd come in, pissed, and had been abusive when he couldn't get the product he wanted today. Was offered for free delivery to his house. A time before free delivery was all over the place. I was kind of scared. First week in retail, alone, and felt like it was a very unsafe situation. No CCTV. He got even angrier because he said I was looking through him like he wasn't even there. Because I was terrified of getting assaulted. Ended up barring him. Still remember his name and customer number more than 20 years on. Story 49. I worked in a boutique men's clothes shop in Manchester in the 90s. A lot of the United players would shop there. Becks, Cole, Giggs, York, all sound lads and really polite. Kieran Richardson was only just breaking through, but acted like he was 3 times World Player of the Year. He handed me a shoe without looking at me and said 9. I didn't take the shoe and just ignored him until he asked properly. I said, "That wasn't so hard now, was it? But A please would be nice." Story 50. I've probably whined about this before on here, but it's one that sticks in my head, and I wonder if he ever gave it a second thought. 40 years ago, I was working in a well-known fashion chain, and I was on the fitting room. We used to get a lot of thefts with people hooking clothes off the ones they were carrying in, so the process was to take the items from the customer and count them, while subtly checking there were none hidden, and give them a number tag, and show them to a cubicle. This also gave them good service. Well, this man took umbrage that I took the clothes and counted them, so he went storming off complaining about me to the supervisor. I could hear him saying, "There's always one bad apple who spoils the lot," and I got told off. Story 51. Customer comes up to tell me their kid had thrown up. I spot the child is still throwing up in the main thoroughfare, and the parents were making no effort to move them or to contain the exorcist level of spew that is coming out of this kid. Just say, "Oh, great," in a sarcastic tone, and then go to get cleaning supplies. When I emerge out of the cleaning cupboard, I stop to tell manager to try reroute people away. The parents come marching up to us, screeching about how some rude Karen made their kids feel like crap for throwing up. And it's us that serve milkshakes, so what the duck do we expect? And they were going to report us. To who? It was so hard to keep a straight face when they were literally complaining about me to my face, not realizing I was the same rude Karen. Story 52. The one that always sticks in my mind was when I worked for the council, and someone called up about their council tax bill. Council tax queries had a completely separate department with a different phone number, and we couldn't transfer calls to them. The guy was just screaming at me from the second I answered the phone and just wouldn't listen to me when I was saying there was nothing I could do to help but could give him the number he needed. More yelling than him saying, "So, why the duck? Can't you just give me the ducking number I need to ducking call?" His wife had also joined in with the yelling at this point. I gave him the number, and he called me a ducking thick, so needlessly aggressive and rude. And if he'd just looked at his bill, he'd have seen the number he needed. F's Story 53, worked on reception and ultrasound department. Guy and his girlfriend came in half an hour after their appointment was due. I did some juggling and spoke with sonographers, and they agreed to see his GF. 10 minutes later, he came back shouting at me about why they hadn't been seen yet. I explained he was half an hour late and they would have to wait until they were called. He said they weren't. I said, "System tells me how long you've been waiting." Then he starts on at me, like, "Oh, you think I'm an idiot because I'm foreign?" I said, "No, mate, you were late and lucky. I've even got someone to see you." Starts calling me an idiot. This back and forth carried on. Then to conclude, he tried to climb over the desk and then spat at me. Story 54. When I was a student in the early 90s, I worked at the AA on the phones, pre-GPS, phone maps, etc. My job was using about a dozen large paper atlases and the caller's own descriptions to find the caller. 8 hours of, "I'm on the motorway to London," and "I'm about half a mile from the co-op." Learned a lot about the general intelligence and kindness of the great British public. Fortunately, call handlers had quite a bit of discretion as to how vulnerable we considered callers. All things being equal, attitude was definitely a factor in how long the call-out took. We were even empowered to decide if the caller was a potential risk of violence to our mechanics, and screaming at a teenager down the phone was in those days taken seriously. Story 55. I can't say that I've ever laughed at a customer who called me a name. I don't find it funny. I've laughed at customers who throw tantrums, but personal attacks, not funny. My last response would be laughter. Even if I was shocked, I had one male customer sneer at me and call me a stupid b-pla-etch because I repeated his order back to him, like I do everyone. But it bugged him. After he said it, I just kind of looked at him as if to say, "Did you really just call me that for doing my job?" Yeah, he did just call me that. Not okay, and not funny. I can kind of understand someone reporting you for laughing at them, even though the customer started it. Not a normal reaction to laugh when sworn at. I don't know, I just don't find abuse funny. Story 56. Wasn't my rudest customer, but some bloke was massively ducking up using self-service. To be clear, absolutely nothing wrong with the machine. I know it's the running joke, but by and large, they're not hard to use or understand at all, and was quite clearly starting to get stressed with the whole thing. One of the till managers very nicely asked if he wanted a hand. He went on an almighty rant, started throwing carrier bags about, and all manner of horrible things were said. Happily, another manager was milling about, and she was not only a big, genuinely lovely personality, but also heavily pregnant and had zero patience for his behavior. It was like watching a child getting told off by his mom. Absolutely glorious. Story 57. For me, the customer was the least worst part of the experience. Literally my first week in the job. Was working for DSG, Curry's these days, and they really had a push on product insurance. Guy was buying a minor appliance and I asked him about the insurance. Maybe more than once. He squared up to me and said that if mentioned the insurance one more time, he would beat me. I went and got the item and put it through the register. The store manager and assistant manager then took me off the floor and called me an idiot because I backed off and didn't ask them to assist. Yeah, so get threatened with violence by a customer, but made to feel worthless by my managers. Sadly, not my worst job. Story 58. I had one many years ago, 21 years ago-ish. I used to work in a bookmaker's, Lad Brooks, and had paid a guy's winnings out. But I'd missed a non-runner. His winnings went from something like £4 to $4.40. He kicked off, called me every name under the sun, said if he saw me out and about, he'd have me. Well, guess who was coming out of the cubicle in the gents' toilets and pub just down the road when there was no ducker around, Mr. Billy Big Bollocks. Only now I wasn't sat on a stool behind a counter. I was towering over him and outweighed him by about 8 stone. He crapped himself, his backpedaling was glorious. I didn't do anything, but I did make him flinch, which was satisfying. Story 59. I worked at TJ Hughes when I was 16. 2 instances stay in my mind even 20 years later. First, a middle-aged woman who wanted to return a maximum $2 mascara because it didn't do what she expected, and on being told no, threatened to go to fair trade. And 2, a man who wanted to know what a particular face cream actually did. I thought maybe they couldn't read the small writing on the packaging, so started to read it, with him then interrupting me. "No, we've read what it says on the box. What does it actually do?" He then complained to my boss about me because apparently I should have tried every single product in the store at length and should know what actual results it will bring, story 60. I work in a call center, won't say which OFC, and I was acting as a coach for a group of newbies. One customer insisted on speaking to a supervisor, so I took the call from newbie, a young woman, early 20s, and I asked, for feedback purposes, why he asked for a supervisor. Well, I mean, what does a woman know about tech, eh? He gave a little laugh, like I'd be with him on the hilarity of that idea. I reminded him that she works here, he doesn't. So she knows more than him and invited him to either speak to my colleague or hang up and call again. He opted to call again. I neglected to mention we had a 20-minute queue at the time. Story 61. When I was 21, I worked in car sales. I said hello to some customers when they walked in and the husband told me to duck off. The wife looked very embarrassed. 10 minutes later, they were lingering around a car outside, so I went over to the husband and said, "Would you like the key or would you like me to duck off?" Very sheepishly, he accepted the offer of the key. After they bought the car, they returned with some flowers and a bottle of Prosecco for me. Story 62. Had someone come in screaming in McDonald's drive-thru at a guy on the headset because he was ordering the most complicated order, and the guy didn't understand to the point I thought he was about to throw punches. And more the fact the manager actually served him and got him his order. And to make sure the guy he shouted at was off headset, he drove through the drive-thru again to order more things. Had someone who reported me when working in a supermarket cafe because their child was sick, and apparently me, the 18-year-old behind the till making coffees, it is my fault. In front of a queue of customers too, and I inspected everywhere and could not find vomit anywhere, or a smell of it. Story 63. I used to be a travel agent, and I still remember this old man called Mr. Bradburn. We booked him on a holiday to Greece. He came back with a broken arm and had various complaints. Once we had the ambulance report back and it said he was heavily intoxicated, the insurance claim was void. He then went on a regular rampage for weeks, swearing, kicking the windows, flipping us off. He was about 80 years old. He was absolutely raging. Story 64. I remember taking a call from a tenant, I worked on social housing, to say their tap washers need replacing. This is included in their tenancy agreement, but I got a tirade and they want to speak to a manager. After a couple of minutes of them speaking to a manager, the manager called me and asked me to book the APT. They had completely undermined me, and I then had to deal with the smug person. Working in social housing, I'd quite often get tenants threatening to come to the office to see if I'd tell them no to their face. One was taking us to court, but I left before that happened. Story 65. The guy who threatened to drag me through the courts personally over a minor issue with letter he'd received. It was literally a monthly scam he was running to collect 50,200 on compo payments from panicked complaint staff like me. I went to lengths to ensure the scam was shut down and took great delight in telling him he'd no longer receive a letter with that minor wording issue. He sounded defeated and it was great. Meanwhile, my mate's wife works in a shop, and recently an Arab man said he was going to hit her and all the other staff because she had dared to talk back to a man. She'd said she could not accept his 10-pound return. Story 66. When I began my first customer service job, I had a call from a priest. He constantly berated me for doing everything at the wrong time. For example, asking him to confirm his address near the start of the call so I could be sure I had the right account. He reduced me to tears and I had to get my manager to take over the call. When he told the priest of his concerns over a member of his staff being reduced to tears, the priest started to berate him too. Story 67. Last week was busy, understaffed. We had a big theft. So I was on the phone, landline, to the police, and the security guard was directing these old ladies to use the self-checkout. They said, "So, I'll do your job for you, shall I, even though you're clearly not doing anything?" It's the first time I've actually clapped back and said, excuse me, but can you not see? I'm obviously on the phone." Story 68. We send out catalogs with products that help people with mobility issues and disabilities. Occasionally, the wrong person may get one. They just need to let us know the property address, and we can make sure it doesn't happen again. Some people, however, seem unable to do this or to just put the catalog in the bin recycling. We've had a guy say they were going to burn the business down because they got one. We've had one mailed back with a scrawled offensive letter containing lots of profanity. We had a woman that called every day for over a week screaming, we were parasites for sending her one. Some people are just nutty. Story 69. The man from Scotland. Order 1. A sink delivered in good condition. The plumber installing it broke it. The merchant requested a refund. The refund was refused because he told us the plumber broke it. Lots of swearing. Order 2. The exact same thing as order 1, but more swearing. Order 3. Same. More swearing though. Order 4. Somehow did the same thing. This time the merchant threatened me, and in a surprise I wasn't expecting, my manager backed me up. Order 5. A sink delivered in good condition. The merchant accompanied the plumber and supervised installation. Success. Story 70. Working on the door of a club, the manager was apparently madly in love with one of the girls behind the bar. She wasn't interested, and he'd been hassling her all day and into the night while she was trying to work. He was crying, so I tried to nicely tell him he needs to leave her alone. She asked me to. With almost no notice, he picked up a bottle and swung it at me. Luckily, I managed to block it and wrap his arm. He got dealt with severely then and sacked the next day. It's far from the most violent, but I think the rudest incident I had. Just started working in retail, never did I realize how many crazy, rude people there are. So tell me, Reddit, what are your crazy customer stories? Story 1. I hate the customers who think it's okay to waste product just because they change their mind, or some other crap. And I do picture framing. So when they change their mind over a ducking inch, it wastes upwards of 100 or each time. It got so bad, the company I work for has changed its purchasing and refunds policy multiple times in the few years I've worked there. Went from charging on pickup to charging on order and redoing an order until the customer was happy to redoing it only if they pay for the redos. Assuming it wasn't our mistake, of course. We also used to offer price adjustments and now no longer do. I mean, seriously, unless you are responsible for finding the best deals and pricing for you. I do tell customers if I know a sale is coming up, but I don't always know. And you certainly shouldn't expect to be able to come back 2 weeks later and get the sale price. Ask me straight up what the best sales are, and I will tell you. People occasionally get uppity over the fact that we charge up front for the orders now, and ask, what happens if I don't like it? And I have to tell them, see this order form that contains all the information about your order, from price to measurements and color, and even includes a picture of what it will look like. Sign here, confirming this is what you have agreed you want and are paying for. Actually, had one woman scream at a coworker over the phone for completing her order because she thought she should be able to come in and approve or disapprove and make changes well after putting the order in point. She did actually change the damn thing 3 times. And stupidly enough, I've had more people get verbally angry at me over our policy to never trim customers' property due to liability issues if we screw it up. They are almost never actually a framing customer, but some lazy person who's too inept to use a pair of scissors. In fact, in the few instances where I've been badgered into going against the rule, I do just pull out a pair of scissors and start cutting, and it usually freaks them out. What's that? You want me to use a paper cutter? Guess what? We don't have a paper cutter because we're not supposed to cut your paper. Sometimes I think the cariniest customers just assume I'm lying to them or something, like I'm actually allowed to cut stuff for them, but I'm just too damn lazy or something. Oh, I just remembered a good recent story, and I actually had another customer compliment me on my patience after this happened. Basically, I had an elderly woman upset because she thought we had cut the petals off her flowers, as in that we had either trimmed her artwork or covered up part of it. Covering part of it would require matting on top of it, which we didn't use. It was just a frame right onto a stretched canvas. I took the frame off to show her the edge of the painting, thinking naively that this would settle the problem. Nope. I and a manager basically spent a half hour trying to explain to this woman that we hadn't cut the tips of the petals off, that they in fact had never been painted in the first place, and there was really very little we could do to help her. We ended up ordering her another frame, 1 quarter bigger than the last. Yeah, even after telling her this would make no discernible difference, it was the only thing we could do to make her go away. Story 2. I once got fake fired in a clothes store called Warehouse. I was in there shopping, just looking through the racks, and this woman comes up to me, holding a top, and asks if they have any other sizes. Now, I'm wearing my big winter coat, which is still wet from the rain outside, so it's pretty clear I don't work there, but I still smile and say, no, I don't work here, but she immediately starts screaming about how rude I am and how I must go and check the back right now. No, I can't, more screaming. She demands my manager. I reply that I don't know the manager because I don't work there. She starts swearing and throwing things at me, yelling that she is the customer, and she is right, and how I am the rudest shop assistant she has ever met, etc., etc. The manager has by now heard what's happening and comes over. Manager. Okay, ma'am, what seems to be your problem? Crazy. This assistant. She is so rude. How can you hire someone so rude to work in your store? The manager kind of looks me up and down and blinks. Manager. I'm sorry, ma'am, but she doesn't work here. I've never seen her before in my life. The crazy woman screams some more about liars and cheats and rudeness and how awful this store is and how she's going to complain, etc., etc. And in the end, the manager just leans over to me and says, look, do you mind if I fire you? I just shrugged and said, go for it. Manager. Damn it, young lady, that's enough. You have been rude to one of our valued customers for the last time. You're fired. Me. Fine. I never liked this job anyway. The customers are rude and unreasonable. We both somehow managed to keep a straight face. The crazy Karen wanders off smirking that she has supposedly cost a poor college student her only source of income. And as soon as she's out of sight, the manager high-fives me and gives me a $10 voucher. It was a pretty awesome day. Story 3. I worked at an office depot for about 3 years, various departments, but ended up in the print center for the last year and a half or so since I knew Photoshop. I had a customer place an order for some prints. I don't remember the specifics, but it was at least 1,500 sheets worth. Nothing special done to them. Single-sided black and white copies from a flash drive. I told him it'd be about 30-45 minutes and he could just stop by in an hour. Job finishes and I pack it up, customer shows up to retrieve it. Everything fine, that is, until he pulls out a photocopy of a credit card, asking if we took Amex. I actually chuckled a bit, assuming it was a joke with how ridiculous it was. Big mistake. Customer. What's so funny? Me. You, you're serious? Customer. Serious about what? Me. Sir, that's a photocopy of a credit card. It has a business name on it as well. Customer. Yes, I'm here for work. I just paid using this at another store. Just run it. Me. Even if I wanted to, you don't have the backside. I don't know the security code. I can't. Still, we don't act. Customer. Listen, kid, I just used this. It's fine. Run it already. I need to be at the airport in 20 minutes. The store was across the road, effectively from the airport. Me. Sir, I literally am unable to run this. Completely. Do you have another method of payment? Customer. All right, that's it. Let me see your manager. Manager. What seems to be the problem? Customer. Your cashier won't accept this credit card. Manager. Looking at the paper in slight disbelief. Well, that's because that's not a credit card. Do you have a valid form of payment? Customer. Now fuming. All right, that's it. You guys can take those copies and shove them up your ass. Starts to leave. Manager. Thank you. Have a nice day, sir. Me to manager. Well, that guy was a big bag of idiot. Manager. Yeah, a real charmer. Oh, that a hole left his flash drive too. We did open it up and look for his information to call him. Just tossed it in the pile of other lost drives. Also, one time, an older woman came in with her grandchildren and wanted me to retrieve pictures from her phone. And in the recently downloaded section of files, there was brutal sex toy, poker face hardcore. There are so many things I could go on about. Copy centers are weird. Story 4. I worked at a Six Flags a few summers ago. It was the first summer job I ever had. Looking back, my best and worst memories of that summer came from that job, and I really learned a lot about hard work. Anyways, I worked at the Superman ride, the busiest one in the park. I also worked a little at the bumper cars as well, but for the most part, I was at the other one. The ride regularly had 2+ hour lines, and since I worked the night shift, I was usually there from 4:01 making sure everybody rode. Because if you were in line at 9:59, you still got to ride. After one particularly hard day, the line was winding down, and it was looking like I had about 45 minutes of work left, which is always a good feeling. All of a sudden, I hear someone screaming and yelling at the guy in the control booth. We've got people on the ride, but we can't send them off when non-employees are on the platform. So I walk over to see what the fuss is all about, and I see a lady with 2 very large men standing next to her, looking intimidating as anything. She's yelling a bunch of nonsense to the control manager. From what I could make out, she was angry that we didn't let her take her stuffed animals on the ride with her. We had to store them before she could get on. But she had all her personal belongings with her now, so I couldn't really understand why she was upset. I could smell alcohol on her, though. It was served in the park, but you could only drink it on special patios. I figured her and her boys had one too many $8 Bud Lights. So I walk up and ask what's going on, which was a stupid move. I should have let my manager handle it. And she just goes off on me. I tell her that I am going to have to call security to get her out and that she's holding up the line and bothering the other riders. She looks me in the eye and says, "Security, security, I am a policewoman. I will arrest your ass. I will arrest all of you." We finally got her out of the ride area, but I was pissed off the rest of the night. When I got home, I realized how funny the whole situation was. And now that's my go-to story when anybody asks how my summer jobs were. Also, one time I caught a guy helping his kid over the rails into the ride area to get something he dropped on the previous ride. I had to suppress the urge to lean down and tell the kind of story about a guy at an Atlanta Six Flags who got decapitated by a roller coaster while searching for his hat in the ride area. Pretty much every night I would go into the ride area with my lead and we'd find all kinds of stuff. 3 working iPhone, dozens of lighters, a Bowie knife, IDs. Story 5, worked at an Office Max part-time for a few years. It was the day after Christmas, 2006. I was newly suffering from kidney stones, so I was doped to the heavens on Vicodin just to get by till my surgery. I walk in the door for my shift, and this guy walks up to me and asks for help. I explained I just walked in the door, and if he'd wait by the office door for a minute, I will get my radio and punch in and be glad to help him. He follows me over, and while in the office for maybe a minute, he wanders off. When I came out, he was gone, and the registers were filling up. My soup, also a close friend, asks me to hop on till the lines thin out. So I do, and my first customer is this rather unassuming woman. Friendly disposition. So mind you, I am in a great amount of pain, but hiding it and trying to not let it show. We make small talk, few laughs. She has a cart filled to the brim, so it takes a bit to check her out. So we finished up, and I ask if there's anything else I can do for her, and she asks very nicely if she can talk to a supervisor. I said sure, and my friend was right behind me. He overheard and asked what he could do for her. She, ducking, explodes. She sticks her finger in my face, touching my nose, mind you. For this, I almost swung at her, and starts ranting how horrible of an employee I am, how rude I am, how I refuse to help her husband. Yep, same guy who I realize is sheepishly cowering behind her, and that I have no business helping anyone. We both just stand there, kind of shocked. Soup looks at me and I simply shrug, which of course pisses her off more. I tell her I just walked indoor and asked him to follow me to office so I could get my radio and punch in. She just starts laughing and screaming that I am a liar. So I look at her husband and ask him to verify, and she literally just shakes his head and stares at the floor. So, she continues, and mind you, a crowd has formed and the lines are piling up behind her. So I finally accept I don't need this job and it's my turn to attack. Obviously, I don't remember verbatim what I said, but it was something along the lines of 1, you're a ducking Karen. Remember saying that very clearly. 2, don't ever ducking touch me again. 3, I'm sorry your ducking husband is spineless, a hole who can't stand up for himself. At this point, I'm being dragged away by a soup friend into the count room. I could hear her screaming for my job at the manager while we were in the count room. My buddy is laughing his ass off, and I'm simply too pissed to care. So after she leaves, my manager calls me in the office. I already have my radio and name tag off, assuming I'm done. He lets me read the complaint and I give my side of the story. He just laughs and tears up the complaint and asks me not to swear so much. Story 6. I have worked at Old Lady, Navy, for about 5.5 years now. Just a part-time job to get me through high school and university. I have so many ridiculous stories, but I will pick a choice few that come to mind. By far the worst customer I have had was a lady about 4 years ago. Back then I was naive and willing to put up with customers' crap. If this was to happen now, I would have told this lady to GDFO. She comes in wanting to return something with a receipt that was bought over 90 days ago. Our return policy is 90 ducking days. Why someone would need more time is beyond me. We don't usually do this, but she described, in detail, my GM at the time, so I started doing the transaction. It won't let me give her money back, but only a mail store credit. She claims that she lives too far out of town, so I send it to her sister's house. She starts freaking out that she wants the money right away. I had explained it could be up to 14 days to get the mail certificate. I can't go back and change the address. So I call my supervisor, who is from Sri Lanka, to the front. He tries to explain exactly what I just said. The woman starts yelling that he should go back to where he came from, go back to India, that she was going to get her husband to come beat us up. I didn't say anything. I was so shocked to be witnessing this. My supervisor told her that he wasn't from India and that she needed to get the duck out of the store or he would call security. She eventually left and never came back. Sheesh, my second best story isn't mine. My friend had given her 2 weeks notice and was done with customers' crap. One night, this lady brings in these girls' jeans that were an old style and B, were obviously worn. She didn't have a receipt and wanted to return them. My friend refused. The lady tries to fight with her and finally says, "The customer is always right." My friend responded, "Not if the customer's a ducking idiot." Best line ever. She didn't even get in trouble because the lady stormed out and didn't call the store to complain. Recently, someone asked my friend if they had higher quality VIP clothing in the back. It's an Old Navy for duck's sake. Retail sucks your soul out. I only have 2 shifts left since I'm done university in a month. I'm never working this type of job again. Story 7. Once worked in a sandwich shop. We got called in an hour early because we had this catering job and had to make a few platters, which are all basically sub-sandwiches cut into smaller pieces for easy eating. So this lady shows up right before the lunch rush and looks at the platters for half a second and says, "Those aren't 2-inch pieces." Apparently on our website, we say that they're cut into 2-inch slices, and they're around that, but we don't use a ruler when slicing them. This isn't wood shop, but they're right around 2 inches. So the guy who sliced them just happened to be the guy who helped her at the counter, and he started to lose it. The manager sees this, comes over, and being the brand new 25-year-old manager says, "We'll do them over for you." One does not simply redo a giant catering order during the lunch rush. So the guy who was helping her goes ballistic another level, and the manager immediately brings him in the back. He starts screaming about what a crazy Karen this woman is, and how it is ridiculous we are going to remake the order, etc. The manager tells him to find a ruler, we don't have one, and help remake the order. At that point, dude completely lost it and made this awkward Howard Dean yell that can only come from massive rage. He started kicking over 5-gallon buckets of everything. Sauerkraut everywhere, then he walks back out front and spits at the nasty entitled Karen, who couldn't deal with possibly 2.5-inch sandwiches, opens the register, takes out all the 20s, crams them in his apron, and walked straight out the front door. The rest of us had the worst lunch rush ever making this Karen. Not just the original order, but extra platters to get her not to go nuclear over nearly being spit on. Story 8. I was a server in Chili's for more time than I care to recall. Had a lot of buttheads come through, but the worst was this. A group of 17 people from Tennessee came in, I'm in Oklahoma, and were at the restaurant for about 2 hours. They were so needy, I had to literally give away my other tables to other servers so that I could meet the needs of these turds. It comes time to pay, and the matriarch pulls out $300 in Chili's gift cards. Their total was like $260 that she had won in a contest. I think, okay, well, hopefully they'll leave me with something good, since I had worked so hard and made absolutely no money that day, due to the huge table taking over. Standard gratuity, there was about 17 to 18, but with anything over about $60, people get cheap and only tip about 10%. So I was hoping for maybe $20.30. They take their check, their to-go boxes, and their to-go iced teas and leave me with nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was a conglomerate of like 3 families, and when this happens, usually one of them will leave a small tip, but nothing. It wouldn't even have been money out of their pocket. They could have tipped me off the gift card and still had enough left to come back again. Even if they thought I'd given bad service, they could have left something, but no, that entire shift was lost to just my hourly wage. When they finally left, it was closing time. Being a college student, I only worked 2 or 3 shifts a week, and my total take from that 5-hour shift, lots of cleaning work after, $6. Please people, no tipping is completely stealing. At Chili's, for parties over 8, if memory serves, there's only a suggested gratuity of 18. Customers can adjust it up or down however they want. Story 9. I once had a woman lose her driver's license in the library I work at, and she was clearly mentally deranged. She insisted that since she had lost it in our building, that it was our responsibility to replace it. After 20 minutes of calmly explaining why that wouldn't be happening, I finally lost my crap and told her to GTFO before I called the cops. And that was only because I couldn't handle being yelling at by the insane anymore. It was hard lesson learned of don't argue with crazy. Another time I had a homeless man walk up to me. We have lots of regulars, but I'd never seen this guy's before, and tell me he was getting ready to die. I was taken aback at first. Not every day some stranger just walked up and honestly admits they're about to do themselves in. I asked him if he wanted me to call someone for him to talk to, like the police. I said the cops would only be helpful in this situation. He agreed, so I told him to grab a seat. The cops arrived, and there were like 10 of them. For some reason, they took him outside and talked with him. I was trying to pay attention to the situation, but I was also still helping patrons. I looked back after helping someone and they were all gone. I never saw the guy again. I hope he didn't hit himself. One last tidbit. I told these Middle Eastern women she owed $2 in fines because her kids' books were late or something. She looks at her kids and screams something at them in their language, then literally threw the books at me and said she wouldn't pay and left. All she needed to do was talk to me about it a little, and I probably would have just waived the fine. She didn't need to throw books at me. My boss said I could press assault charges or some stupid crap, but I didn't. Never saw them again. I feel bad for the kids. Story 10. I worked at Ross for almost 2 years, and man, people could be such rude. There were always people trying to cheat the system by trying to return used stuff. They showed up every other day with like trash bags full of clothes, toys, dinnerware, and other stuff. Our policies kept changing, so Ross basically forced us to return the crap they brought, which in turn made them bring more and more used stuff. I think they might have gotten away with a little over 1,000 until one of my managers went ape crap on them. She started screaming at them to stop coming to the store, and that if they came back, she was going to call the cops. The couple returned since then and tried to, once again, return used stuff. The person checking them out was someone in training, and one of my coworkers warned the other girl in Spanish. Most of us were Hispanic, so we did that when we knew the people were gets shady. So the male customer starts shouting at my friend and starts threatening her life. Guy told her to watch herself after we closed because they were going to be waiting. I had this lady one time that I personally believe was mentally unstable. Well, she wanted to return some used shoes. They looked like she ran through mud and looked like the bottom of a used skateboard. I went through the whole, "I'm sorry, ma'am, our policy states that we cannot return used merchandise" deal, to which she didn't like very much. I called the manager because I honestly wanted to help her out, but I would get in trouble if I returned those shoes. So, as we waited for my manager to come up, she started mumbling under her breath. She was talking to herself and then looked at me to shout that I didn't have a heart. She said I was a horrible human being for not helping her out, and that I was going to. Anyway, I know we're supposed to remain calm, and I usually do, but I had been there for approximately 14 hours that day and was tired of crap. I just walked away and clocked out. All the stories that retail brings, I personally think that everyone should experience at least a day in retail so that they know what we go through. Story 11. I once worked at a pizza place and we did delivery. I took a phone order from a guy, put the order in, assembled the soda, breadsticks, pizza, napkins, peppers, cheese, and so on. The delivery was taken out and I forgot about it. 2 hours later, I answered the phone again, and it was the same guy raving about how I didn't give him extra Parmesan cheese, which he hadn't asked for, but assumed I knew. My manager saw how upset I was and took the phone from me. He then told the guy off and told us all to refuse deliveries to that address. Another time when I was working at Old Navy, there was a huge summer rush. This means there were a lot of women trying on swimsuits. During that weekend, there were at least 3 women trying suits on during their period. I know there were more than 3, but I know about these 3 because they bled all over the suits and every other thing they tried on. We had to throw the clothes out when we found out. Never did catch them. Story 12. Having had served my time in retail, nothing beats a good old-fashioned armed robbery by a customer who thought we were ripping her off. Basically, a bill complaint escalated into a heated debate. Then she pulled a knife. I pulled the silent alarm and tried to defuse the situation, telling her I would take care of her bill if she put down the blade. Feigned effort almost failed just as the cops pulled into the parking lot. T-Mobile. Still, hospitality is even better. Some of the winners from my hotel days. Couple having sex in the public hot tub. Guest. Can I have a minute to finish? Me. 1 minute? I don't know if that's more insulting to me or to her. The guy who left adult mags under his mattress for the cleaning staff to find. The guy who we thought was an addict who kept a loaded handgun in his room and kept calling me at the front desk for substances. Turns out he was a paranoid skiotes with a penchant for substances. The little old anorexic lady who would steal all the sugar from the coffee station and spend an hour in the public bathroom. We could never figure that one out, but we knew she wasn't pooping. Cake taker, the dude trying to pass himself off as a lady who would periodically call to the desk from an outside line, ask for random room halas, and try to initiate phone sex with random guests. The thing is, we found out this had been going on for some time before someone complained. I guess a few of those guests didn't mind their wake-up call. Story 13. I worked in an Office Max and have nothing apart from horror stories in retail can tell you. We didn't really offer support service because we were a retail location, but some woman who was clearly distraught called and asked for help. It was a slow day, and so I took her call in the office. I asked her what the problem was, and she immediately came back with a slurry of problems. I can't open anything on my computer. It's not turning on. Yada yada. Obviously, anyone who knows anything about working with computers over the phone knows a hardware problem that stops you from turning the computer on is the worst to deal with, because there is no hints of what's wrong, only complete failure. I was enjoying doing something besides standing at the cash register, so I told her I'd be in for a while, and to bring it in, and I would look at it. Now, I was no expert on computers, but I had assembled some of my own and knew enough to diagnose rudimentary problems. She came by, and all my knowledge was useless, largely because the problem was so obvious. She brought it into the office, and immediately I had to stop myself from laughing. It was an older machine, and I knew that we were going to have to replace it immediately. I got this story from her. Well, my nephew was over and he looked at it while it was still running, but it was running slow, so he looked at it and said it was overheating, and the next time he came by, he would bring some liquid coolant. This liquid coolant is the compressed air that computer stores sell to clean your dusty comps without damaging them. And I already had some in the garage, so once he was gone, I just poured some into the slot. It was coolant for cars, and vent was actually the vent for the fan to blow out. Yeah, so I held back laughter initially, and then realized that as I grow older and technology gets crazy, I'm going to be just as stupid looking as her. Story 14. Here a couple guy comes in with a shirt to return that had a security tag, beep beep, and some shorts. No receipt. He made it quite clear he threw it away. He didn't lose it, he threw it away. Then starts giving me crap about our policy of no receipt. Lowest sale price in store credit. He's got a little kid there, maybe 2, and he's cussing all over the place. Gives me crap about the cashier that didn't remove the tag, and complaining about losing money. I work in store A. Woman comes in with a bag full of stuff from store B and hands me a pair of pants with a security tag that we don't use. It was a rectangle and ours are round. She's even holding a receipt from store B and asks me to take it off. I say I can't, our machine doesn't do that. Go back to store B, have them take it off. She says they couldn't do that because, and says some garbage excuse about clearance, and then leaves. Weird. Both of these actually happened yesterday. Here's another that happened months ago. 2 sketchy guys come in, baggy pants, wife beater, etc., go downstairs to our footwear department, buy some Air Force Ones, pay for them, have the receipt and don't want a bag. Leave the store, enter again a few minutes later with a shoebox and no bag, presumably with the shoes in there. Go downstairs again, spend some time down there and come up and head out. Footwear guy asks them as they're leaving to see the receipt, Guy just flips out, cussing like a sailor. I just paid for these, etc. At least 2 minutes of back and forth before he finally decides to let the guy check. He had the proper shoes the whole damn time, and yet would not show the receipt and just flipped a crap for no reason. Story 15. I get threatened constantly at work, by men and women, girl here. If I don't get at least 4 or 5 threats a week to have my face smashed in, or to wait for me outside and beat me up, it's not a normal week. I've had rocks thrown at me. Someone smashed my monitor. I get sworn at constantly. People try and steal hardware, but I've always managed to get it back. Some people haven't been so lucky. I had one gypsy following me around the other week and wouldn't leave me alone for over an hour. He bought an iPhone 3G from us, but brought it back saying it wouldn't charge. I took a look at his receipt. Yes, he had bought one. I took a look at the charge port. It was wrecked. There was nothing left of it. I popped the SIM tray and checked the IMEI number. It matched, but I couldn't pull it out all the way because the metal inside was mangled. I took the phone to the manager and told him what was going on. I knew the customer was going to kick off, so I got him to tell the guy he could not get a new phone and we wouldn't fix his. He flipped out, ripped the SIM tray out, and then it wouldn't go back in because of the metal inside being wrecked. He then claimed I broke his SIM tray and proceeded to follow me around for the next hour, yelling at me. I couldn't serve anyone else because of him. I gave up and went to do something else and try and hide from him. Eventually, he left, but I was getting threatened by the end of it. I get paid minimum wage as well. I want a new job. Story 16. 1. A lot of people assume they know your store-depth job better than you do. I didn't know how many times I've been told I carry something and that they just bought it here last week, and it's an item I have never carried. 2. The worst. Had a mother and daughter come in shopping for body jewelry. When I asked them what they were looking for, they gave a horrible description of what I could only deduce was an industrial barbell. I could clearly see the girl did not have an industrial piercing in either ear, and told them flat out that this was not what they were looking for. They insisted that they wanted to buy it, so I explained to them the no return, no refund policy we had for body jewelry. Pathogen risk, obviously. When they said they still wanted it, I explained again there would be nothing I could do if it wasn't right. They insisted I ring it up, so I did, reluctantly. I watched them walk out if the store, opened the pack, tried in her cartilage piercing in her upper ear, immediately realized it was not going to work and head back toward my store. They wanted to return it. I almost laughed, but kept it together. When I told them, as I had not 5 minutes earlier, that there was nothing I could do for them, the mother snapped. Big yelling fit. I just kept repeating, "Sorry, there's nothing I can do." She demanded the store manager. I was the store manager. She demanded my boss's number. I wrote it down and gave it to her. A couple days later, I heard from my boss, thanking me for doing my job. Also, turns out what they were really looking for was one of those ear cuff chain to earring things that you can get at Claire's or other cheap jewelry stores. Story 17. Worked in retail for 6 years and still going strong, many stories. Funny, I was standing at the front doors of the office supply store I work at, greeting customers as they come in, when this older homeless man comes in with a boombox on his shoulder. I greet him even though he is giving me a very strange look. Before you know it, he sets the boombox down on the floor, turns some techno on, and starts dancing around like a vagrant on crack. The best way to describe it is, it looked like he was dancing around an imaginary campfire while doing his own rendition of Lord of the Dance. Funniest crap ever. Rude short story. Had an amazingly obese woman and her younger, thin daughter come in and requested a motorized cart. We don't have any, many stores do not. So I politely tell her we do not have any, but we have a chair she can sit and wait in. Without missing a beat, she went to nuclear stage. What in the hell do you mean you don't have any? So you don't seem to care that disabled people can't shop here? You pig. I'm a girl, so I got a chuckle out of being called a pig by a 800-pound cow. She proceeded to just Karen me out until I'm fairly sure she lost all of her breath. The company in my big manger is huge on getting no complaints, which is what she was threatening to do. So yes, one of my store associates ended up pushing her around the store in our biggest office chair we carried. True story, I bought that associate lunch that day. Story 18. I started working at a local grocery chain in August of 2008. Over the course of the last 4 years, I've graduated from being a cashier to a customer service team leader. Basically, I'm a glorified customer service staff with a tiny bit more authority. Either way, things were relatively normal for the first 2.5 years I worked there. But in August, everything changed. I had just been promoted to team leader and was working a closing shift. It was about 9:30 p.m. and we still had a few customers in the store, but mostly we were preparing to lock the doors in about a half an hour. Now, next to the store I work in, there are several restaurant-bar combinations, and consequently, we get quite a few people hammered out of their minds coming through. But a few minutes past 9:30, a man stumbles in through the door and staggers towards the restroom. It's pretty normal, I think. Nothing of it, but keep my mind on this guy. About 10 minutes later, there is someone screaming bloody murder in the men's restroom, given that I was the only supervisor in the store. and the only other people near the restroom were women. I ran in to see what the problem was. I walk in, and reflected in the mirror over the sink, I see an image that will forever be ingrained in my head. There is a man standing completely naked pleasure on top of a toilet. I slowly back out of the restroom and immediately phone the police, whom arrived promptly. I went home very soon after that. I was scarred. Story 19. I worked at GameStop during the holidays. Black Friday was busy, but it actually wasn't as chaotic as I expected, except for this little incident. Something went wrong with the transaction. Either our computer messed up or one of the cashiers did something wrong. But whatever the case, it ended up charging this couple's credit card 10 times for one purchase. We tried assuring them that the problem had been addressed and the money will be back in their account within the next 2 to 3 business days, but they would hear none of it. The lady said, "No, we need our money back right now, or your store owes us $500 of merchandise." We calmly told them that we've done all we can and they just have to wait for the money to go back into their account. But again, they didn't want to wait, so they followed through on their threat. I'm assuming most of you know how GameStops are set up, so this will seem absolutely ridiculous to you. They ran around the store, grabbing cases off the wall. Empty cases. Those things are just up there for display and checkout. The game discs themselves are behind the counter. They didn't even bother with the working accessories we had out there. All of us were just standing around thinking, seriously, is this happening? The other customers seemed pretty baffled too. One lady in the store just sort of looked at what was going on and said, "I should probably come back later." Mall security showed up soon after and escorted them out, and we silently cursed them because of the mess they made. That was about the most exciting day I've ever had there. Story 20, where to start with Domino's customers. Of course, there's the occasional person who orders carry-out online thinking that it's for delivery. What? No, I ordered delivery. Did you order online? Because it says here, you selected carry-out. Well, yeah, I thought that meant they'd carry it out to me. Then there are the ones who think our prices are too expensive. Just the other night, I had a conversation go like this. How much is a large one topping pizza? At menu price, it's $11.99. Oh, hell no, and hang up. The customers who call after we're closed, and I answer the phone to inform them of this fact, and then they ask, "Oh, so you're not delivering anymore?" "No, we close at 1 a.m. There's one customer that doesn't like it when we ask for his name or address. I don't know the whole story with him. I think he has schizophrenia, and is really offended when we do, even though we have to because we never know when it'll be a mystery caller using his number. Or the one lady who insists we never put enough green peppers on her pizza, so she makes us weigh out the triple amount of green peppers and takes that has her toppings. There's the customers who get angry because they can't use a certain special that's only for a certain time of the week, like our carryout special on Mondays through Wednesdays. I want that carryout special you guys have. Well, that's only Monday through Wednesday, and today is Saturday, sorry. Oh, well, I'll call you back in a few minutes then. There are other customers. That's just my personal experience with them. Story 21. I was working at a department store in the health and beauty department, stocking shelves. One morning, I was putting out face cream when this old woman comes along, pushing an empty cart. I move closer to the shelves to make room, squatting down. There's still at least 2 cart widths in the aisle, so I figure I'm fine. She stops her cart and stares at me. I smile and ask, "Ma'am, can I help you with something?" Even though I'm technically not supposed to be helping customers. It's a rare shift where I'm still working during store hours. Silence. "Ma'am, are you all right?" At that, she suddenly takes her cart and rams it into my side with a surprising amount of old lady force, knocking me to the floor. She almost runs me over again, but I manage to roll out of the way, certain that this is how I will die, and I will have to have "death by shopping cart" engraved on my tombstone. She rushes the cart right up to me and stops, the bottom rack an inch from my face. "Are you willing to help me now?" she asks sweetly. "What?" The duck. I am shaking as I get up. She wants help choosing a toothpaste. I help her as best as I can, as she keeps acting like the kind, sweet old grandma. As she walks away, she says, "I hope my grandbaby grows up to be like you." Apparently, she left a $20 tip at the cash register for me. I still don't know what the duck was going on. Story 22. Third key associate at GameStop, managerial responsibilities, associate pay, and authority. A customer comes in with a phishing controller for the phone, trying to return it. They were crap and I empathize, but our return policy, while lenient, ended 3 days ago for this purchase. He can't understand, why won't I just take it back? Give him the money and just say someone robbed him. Let him take something of the same value. I can't do those things. I can't just make an exception, because if I did, and the district manager came through, which was likely, his office was at our branch, I could get fired. His $30 wasn't worth my job, but I would do anything I could to ensure the manager took care of him. Not good enough. I am now many profane things to this man. I have done inappropriate things with my mother, who is apparently a dog of some poor breeding. He storms out, which I'm all right with. A few minutes later, he comes back with the manager for KB Toys from a few doors down, a friend of his. Now both of them are screaming at me. I am being way inflexible, and need to open up the register before this gets ugly. My manager shows up. He asks what's going on, points at KB manager. You, leave. Don't tell us how to run our store. We won't tell you how to push Tickle Me Elmo. My manager's a big dude. He complies. The customer is irate. My manager listens and then places the controller in his hand and explains we aren't taking it back. The end. Story 23. I worked in a furniture store a few years ago. One day, a furious customer came in the store with a wardrobe door he had bought earlier. He slammed the door on the counter and started yelling how it was blue when it was supposed to be white. He also made very clear that he was an engineer and didn't have time for crap like this. When my colleague calmly removed the blue protective film, revealing the white door, the customer didn't say anything. He just picked the door and walked out of the store. Story 24. When I was a teenager, I was a trainer at McDonald's and was training a new girl in the drive-thru. A man came through in a big lifted truck with a quad in the back and his country music blaring. He proceeds to order a plethora of burgers, fries, milkshakes. The new girl was taking the order and being brand new was slow as all hell. He is talking to his other buddies in the truck about how this girl must be some kind of retard, and she was getting upset. I took over for her and told her to start bagging up their food. He gets to the window, I force a smile and hand him his food. He slowly starts to pull away and I go over to take another order. I look over to see this guy has backed his truck up to the window again and is honking his horn like he's witnessing murder. The trainee walks up to the window and opens it to see what he needs, and the second that window opened, a Big Mac sailed right through and hit her square in the face. He and his buddies all laugh, and he peels out of the drive-thru, narrowly missing hitting a parked car. Now, this girl was maybe 14, and it was literally her first day. She starts bawling and takes off out of the store, never to be seen again. Story 25. I work as a cashier at a pretty big hardware sporting goods store. We sell a lot of things that farmers use, and for horses and things, so we offer tax exemption on things that are to be used on a farm. So when one of these things is scanned, a notice comes up on the computer requesting if it is to be exempted. Rope is one of these things. So one day I was working the closing shift, and about 15 minutes before we were to close, two bigger men came through my line with some stuff, a ramp, some hardware, and some rope. Knowing the rope would come trigger the computer to ask me if it was to be used on a farm, I saved it for last, and when I got there, sure enough, the notice popped up on the screen. I asked the man if it was for farm use, and like it normally does, he was caught off guard. So I repeated the question and in a low voice, loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough for me to not know if he was ashamed for saying this or ashamed for it being true. He said, "Not unless roping up fat chicks is farm use." This kind of caught me off guard, so I pressed no and finished the transaction, and it wasn't until later that I processed what he said and found it hysterical. Story 26. I worked retail for 12 years. So many stories I've blocked out of my memory. Once, when I worked at Blockbuster, this guy came in with his young son, 5-6 years old. I think he was probably Native American. This comes into play later. He wanted to use an expired coupon that he didn't even have on him for a deal that had ended a while back. So I tell him I'm sorry, that promotion is over and you needed to have the coupon anyway. Here's what we have instead. He gets incredibly angry, just ranting about how I'm trying to cheat him out of his money, etc. I'm trying to calm him down with platitudes like, "Yes, sir, I understand that this is frustrating," when suddenly he finishes his rant with, "This is just like what happened with the blacks." Now, I was in full customer service groveling mode, so for some reason I thought he meant another store in the mall, which was called Blacks, and sold camera equipment. So I'm like, "Sir, I'm very sorry you had a bad experience with Blacks, but this is Blockbuster, and unfortunately I can't give you this discount." I have never seen a guy get that pissed off that fast. He picked his kid up so fast I thought he was going to throw him. They stomped out of the store, never to be seen again. That's when I realized he'd been playing the race card. Story 27. I sold clear internet in a mall kiosk. During my first week, a drunk guy stumbles up to me and shoves a modem into my chest and starts telling me he wants to return it. He said it didn't work and he wanted his money back right now. He said he had talked to me and I personally had said he could get it returned if he didn't like it. So then I opened up the box to look at the modem and it was broken in half, literally broken in half. He said he never even opened the box and it couldn't have been him. All meanwhile, his equally drunk friend is pushing my shoulder telling me I'm a ducking idiot. Then the guy picks up my phone from by my computer, said he was calling my manager, and just walks off. So I walk up to him and grab his shoulder. Then his drunk friend swings at me, misses, and falls over. The guy with my phone just drops my phone and starts to walk away, leaving his friend. Meanwhile, a security guard saw the whole thing and came over, already having had called the cops. Eventually, they got arrested and ended up having warrants and substances on them. Quite the experience for my first week on my first job. Story 28. I used to work for a grocery store chain in the South. We sold lotto and cash checks. I have encountered the nicest of people and the absolute worst. Asked a guy once to remove his hat and sunglasses for the picture machine. When you cash a check, it takes a picture of you, the check, and your ID. Basically, he said to duck off. I handed him his stuff and said just as loudly as he did to get the duck out and have a nice day. Came back next day and he had his hat and sunglasses off before he even got to the front. A hole. In a lotto story. Old guy gets passed up by accident and starts having a fit. So I tell him I will finish this transaction and he will be next. Starts cursing and so on. And I ask him to not speak to me like that. He says I'm rude and something else and asks for the manager. Mike is a scrawny older guy who doesn't stand his ground very well, but I liked him because he was a good guy. Customer starts to berate him and myself, and the manager starts to apologize. I then tell my manager to kick him out for how he is acting. The customer goes berserk and says he will never shop here again. I laugh and tell him where the door, and I would appreciate never seeing him again.